Today on the Free Lunch, I'm talking to Tom Bowen Wright. Tom grew up in England and went to Oxford University and later worked for McKinsey and lived in New York. Eventually, he made his home in Dallas, Texas, which is where I met him. And also, he found his professional passion in US healthcare innovation via the smart application of technology. Tom believes the US healthcare system is burdened by misaligned incentives, soaring costs, and outcomes that lag behind other nations, a reality he's seen firsthand while leading innovation across payers, health systems, provider networks, startups, and consultancies for more than 15 years. Guided by his personal mission of making healthcare the way it should be, he has witnessed both remarkable transformation and the industry's deep resistance to change. Today, he is president of Ascend Medical. Ascend delivers holistic primary care directly to patients' homes, using technology to eliminate inefficiencies and empower providers to spend more time with patients while addressing the root causes of their health challenges. This is the Free Lunch Podcast. To support this podcast, please subscribe to the channel, like the video. And now, here's my conversation with Tom Bowen Wright. Oh, hello. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the Free Lunch. When I like to get together over lunchtime and talk to interesting people who are doing interesting things in the world, usually in some kind of leadership position. And today I'm very, very excited to be joined by Tom Bowen Wright, who is not only an extraordinarily interesting executive doing some fascinating things, but also a great friend of mine who I was very lucky to get to know when I recently lived in Dallas. So welcome, Tom. Let me tell you a little bit about Tom. He went to Oxford where he studied mathematics, so you probably already get a little bit of an idea about him. He did an MBA at Columbia and then went into consulting with McKinsey, and then gradually kind of moved, I guess, sort of transcended towards the health industry of the United States, where he's been heavily involved for a number of years now, working for Baylor Scott and White, which was actually Texas's largest nonprofit health system, and then for United Healthcare Group, which I think is even bigger, and is now president of Ascend Medical. And Tom is going to tell us a bit about what he's been doing there and how essentially he's bringing transformation and new ideas to the health industry. Is that a reasonable introduction, Tom?
That works, Eddie.
If I've forgotten something,
No free lunch, though. I mean,
yeah, exactly. No free lunch, Tom. So tell us what you're up to at Ascend, if you can, and just kind of like give us an idea of what your ambitions are for that business.
well, I mean, maybe Eddie, I might just start with, my driving force. And back in my McKinsey days, there was this time we did a leadership sojourn out to the Utah mountains, and they said, "Hey, Tom, you got to go up that mountain, and when you come back, you better have a mission statement for yourself." And it was quite hard exercise, right? It was the first time I had to really think about, oh, geez, who do I want to be and what makes me tick? And I came back down that day with a mission statement of making healthcare the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my driving force. I wake up in the morning, and it's been very consistent. I love it. So it's really about, how do you use innovation and transformation to really make a difference. And so that kind of comes through, I do that really by designing, building, and scaling products that delight customers. And those could be technology products, clinical products, financial products. and now I'm really, running an innovative provider organization. You're kind of doing all of the above, right?
I
And
read something that you had written where you were saying not just about profiting from making things work better, but actually making them work better. And I thought that was an interesting distinction. And I think if you wouldn't mind, I think it would be really useful for people just for you to, tell us what's wrong with the health system in the United States,
oh,
if you can do that. And
the biggest thing that's wrong with the United States versus, if you look, is the misalignment of incentives.
right.
And I mean, you see a lot of people. I mean, it's now 20% of the US economy. It's huge, right? And it grows and grows voraciously. It's almost like a tapeworm sucking on the US GDP. And you say, well, why is it just growing this immovable force? And the misalignment of it, you've got a lot of people profiting. It's an extremely profitable business. And if you think about the pharmaceuticals, you've got the pharmacy benefit managers, and I'm just going by the size of profits, right? The insurance companies, you got your providers, your doctors, it's like health systems, just a lot of people very incentivized to profiteer from the system. And sadly, it highlights the screwed up structure of our US government, where fundamentally a lot of the people who should be catering to the people are actually on the payroll of these lobbyists. And so very little has changed. And the person who gets screwed is the employer and the employee, who are, basically on the hook for paying for all of this.
Mhm. And the patients, how do you think they?
Well, and fundamentally, what it comes through is that patients, depending on who you are, you're either getting excellent care or crappy care,
Mhm.
mostly based off affordability. But almost certainly you're getting overpriced care.
Mm. And which you don't necessarily pay for out of your own pocket because if you're well insured, but nevertheless, I mean, you probably do pay it out of your own pocket because you have to pay that insurance. But what I mean is that the amount of money that it costs to do a certain type of operation seems to be far greater in USA than it is in some other countries, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it's typically, 3 times.
Yeah.
And I mean, depending on the country, and think about the UK. Um, yeah, and a lot of that's just in salaries. A lot of that's in like the insurance. I mean, just the risk of getting insured as a doctor is so high. So now you're like malpractice insurance. It's huge, and
Yeah.
but it's just a lot of structural waste in the US system.
There's a tremendous amount of money swirling around, isn't there? So tell us more about Ascend and what you've set out to do. You told us about your personal mission statement, which I thought was beautiful, but tell us about the mission of Ascend and how you're going to make that difference.
Yeah, Sentence mission is to elevate body, mind, and soul. We do that through providing a comprehensive care experience and try to do that on your terms, make that convenient and affordable. Now, when we say comprehensive care experience, it's really looking at taking the physical, the mental, the metabolic, and lifestyle aspects of your health and integrating those into a single sort of clinical product.
Mhm.
You're like, okay, what does that mean?
That sounds impressive.
Well, let me just back up and kind of say, working for these big health systems, one thing that I always really struggled with was how fragmented care delivery had become from breaking up the physical, the mental, and the metabolic. So if we think about, I don't know, let's take a menopausal lady.
Mhm.
and she's suffering from poor sleep, tiredness, these types of things. So physical symptoms, right? Often struggling with forms of depression, anxiety, uh, um, and fundamentally, a lot of that's driven actually by our hormones, which are kind of changing, and that's creating all kinds of changes in her, body and her mind. And, and, you look at how the US healthcare system is set up, that especially the mental health care side of things is completely separate. So health systems, by and large, do not hire behavioral health folks. There's no therapists who work for health systems. There are very, very few psychiatrists, and those psychiatrists are really stuck in the emergency room doing, helping drug addicts and stuff.
Mhm.
So fundamentally, behavioral health is over here, physical health is over here, and connecting the two, often like the metabolic side of things, that's the kind of domain of endocrinologists, and there's so few of them that nobody can actually get in to see them, so there's no access, right? And that's a reflection of it just hasn't been particularly well paid, and yet diabetes is going up like crazy, and so there's just a supply demand imbalance.
So sorry, just so I've got that clear, you're saying that there are certain types of medicine in the USA which are less well paid, less highly thought of, less opportunity for people to make tons of money out of it as doctors, but and maybe as insurers, and yet those are vital, and people are not able to get to them.
Well, I think that's a much bigger theme. What you're finding is the um, all all the specialties that are preventative in nature are very poorly paid, and all the specialties that are transactional in nature, like surgeries, are very highly paid.
Interesting.
And so you just talent moves to where the economics rewards them. So there are an inundation of orthopedic surgeons here in Dallas, and yet there's a total paucity of endocrinologists.
That's really interesting. And so, sorry, I don't want to spoil your flow, but would you say that Ascend was fundamentally aiming for a preventative model?
Fundamentally, yeah, our aim is to help you navigate your journey to longevity and happiness.
Mm,
And those two things, right? Just you can be very healthy, but you can be unhappy.
yeah.
What's the point? It's that lifespan versus health span, as they say. And so really thinking about the human as a whole and saying, well, there's the mental aspects of you as well as the physical, and often it connects with lifestyle and metabolics. And if you're not looking at all four, you don't really understand a person. And now, not everybody needs that. You've got your 25-year-old healthy male. Yeah, it's fine. But what you often find is folks who are struggling a little bit with some form of mental health aspect are, in general, really struggle to find good access to dealing with things. And often, so the mental health, I mean, you could go find yourself a therapist, right? But if you've got sleep issues, got pain issues, like the therapist can't really do anything about it. They can't write you prescriptions for those things. You need a doctor for those things. And often the physical health and mental health are highly related. And then pain is a great example.
Yeah.
I mean, how many friends do you have who've got back pain?
Mm.
Struggle with it, and it's constant. It just wears you down. And I don't know anybody with back pain who doesn't have some form of mental health challenges, right?
And so, sorry, just once again, just sort of checking I'm understanding that what we're saying is that a lot of current medical care is kind of reductionist. It kind of looks at one particular problem, but it isn't holistic. It isn't sort of thinking about the full person. And so if you, for example, if you're suffering from some kind of illness, they'll treat the illness, but they won't treat the possible side effects of the mental health and as you said, being happy as well as being more healthy again.
Yeah, I'll just point to my own example, right? So it took me working with some of these folks, but people to point out, Tom, you've got an anxiety issue. And I was like, really? Would never have diagnosed myself with that. I said, you should probably talk to somebody about that. Okay. All right. Since I'm in this business, I should probably try consuming it. So I ended up speaking to one of our therapists. The therapist starts asking me, tell me about my sleep. And, he's like, oh, well, what kind of meds do you take for that to sleep? I was like, yeah, I take, 12 milligrams of melatonin every night. He was like, are you crazy? That's way too much. What are you doing? And he said, hey, do you have a primary care doc? I said, yeah, I've got a primary care doc. But it would probably take me 6 weeks to get in with him to talk about sleep. He said, oh, well, I can get you in with Dr. Trevino tomorrow and we can have him take care of that. And so, I'm speaking with Dr. Trevino about the sleep and he says, okay, well, Tom, you're mid-40s, male, have you had your hormones checked? Or when was the last time? I said, yeah, I had them checked a while ago. And I was like, I want to get them checked again. So get my hormones all, totally out of whack. But then looking at that, it turns out my cholesterol was really low. And so apparently cholesterol is one of the things that is the feeder for testosterone. So anyway, like between, the doctor, the endo and the therapist, they're all kind of looking at Tom and they're saying, and the one thing they could all agree was Tom's lifestyle was a big part of the problem, right? And so it's not just like, Tom, here's a pill. Like that's the US healthcare industry. Here's a pill. And everybody just wants to take a pill and make it better. But it's saying, actually, no, hey, Tom, you got to start doing exercises to, address some of your anxiety. You need to start sleeping better. You need to start hydrating better. You need to start thinking about your exercise better. And you need to rebalance your hormones. And as you start doing that, it's like, I feel like a different human being.
All right.
You lose weight, you find more balanced lifestyle. I'm not saying everything's worked out, but if you're put on a healthcare trajectory that, like, that's an experience I've never got from any kind of healthcare organization.
But also you're probably thinking about aspects of it that you would never have thought about in
Never thought
a
of
previous situation.
Just
Focus on the back pain, and take pills for the back pain, and as a result, probably make yourself iller. By the way, one thing is just to say congratulations. You're the only person I've ever heard of with low cholesterol. Everybody I know in the world has high cholesterol.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, that is so interesting. And so you made yourself a kind of personal guinea pig for your own company to sort of see how it worked.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to practice what you preach. And actually, by being a patient of our company, it's really helped me understand how the offering works and how it needs to work.
Yeah.
And, one of the things coming out of, for me, the big wake-up call, we designed this product kind of saying this is healthcare the way it should be, but didn't really have a clear idea of who the customer was.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of get out and you start serving patients, and then you seeing, well, who's a good customer around here? Who are your loyal customers? And we just found that this model started doing extremely well with anybody who struggled with some kind of behavioral health symptom.
Yeah.
that actually the relationship between the therapist and the patient was probably way deeper than the primary care dog.
Mm-hmm.
And so think about, well, we initially started thinking about how do we drive primary care patients into therapy. But coming out of this, just turned everything on its head. It's like, well, what do we do? Why don't we start with a therapeutic offering and then see how we can drive behavioral health patients into an integrated care model? And what you find is folks with behavioral health elements, they make up about 23% of the US population. They make up about 59% of the US healthcare spend. So they're far more likely to be obese, far more likely to have metabolic issues,
Mm-hmm.
are often less likely to actually have a doctor, which is crazy, right?
Right. Is.
And so really saying, wow, this is a huge part of the population who is either having real access issues or is having fragmentation issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so could we create scalable, affordable product that really meets those folks? And then if we could be successful, there's just the demand for behavioral health is so high that your ability to acquire patients cheaply is pretty good. And that
I was going to ask you about, your go-to-market, in the sense that not only is the health system not used to this kind of offering, but also the patients are not that used to it either. So
correct.
patient turns up saying, "I've got backache. Can I have some nice paracetamol, please?" And then suddenly they're confronted with, "No, well, we've got a whole sort of behavioral health approach for you." So I'm interested to know, like, how did you resolve?
I might go further. The providers aren't used to it.
Right.
So when you're getting therapists, they're just like not used to working with doctors, and doctors aren't used to working with therapists. So there's just a lot of change around.
Okay. And so your first step, if you like, is, are you physically located around Atlanta? Is that right? Was that where your first practice was?
And Athens, yeah, in Georgia.
And is a lot of this delivered online, or are we talking, is it a remote offering, or how are you using the sort of digital aspects, if you like, of?
Yeah, it's a mix.
Yeah.
So typically a lot of the primary care is delivered in person in clinics. What you find is a lot of that follow-on care you can do virtually, and the behavioral health can be done almost exclusively virtually. Depends on the patient. At the very highest acuity on the behavioral health spectrum, you find dementia patients.
Mm-hmm.
And dementia patients you find are mostly concentrated in assisted living facilities or senior living facilities. So a lot of our business now, we actually build clinics in these senior living facilities to care for that population. They have obviously huge behavioral health needs, but man, they are very sick with very little access.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of physical, a lot of metabolic, and an extreme lifestyle risk. So yeah, we having kind of focused in on those behavioral health patients, we've gone all the way to like the sickest of the lot and have actually dealt a specific business around caring for those folks.
Right. And are you getting encouraging feedback? I mean, are you getting results?
Um, I have to say that the results in the assisted living business, it warms your heart. Um, these people have been rejected by society. They've been rejected by their families, right? So it's like, no, you can't live at home anymore. We're going to have to move you into a facility. They've been largely rejected by the US healthcare system. It's because of complications around powers of attorney, whatever. It's just very difficult for people to serve them profitably, which means pretty much nobody serves them, which means that they end up in the emergency room the whole time. And on average, their expected amount of time in a hospital is about 24 times that of your neighborhoods. Yeah. Like, it's bonkers, right?
Mm.
And it's just because society and structure has kind of screwed them. And so when you go in and you provide this level of care, the reaction from their kids, the reaction of the patients themselves, and also just at the facility, the people working at the facility, they're so delighted for the help. They're like, finally, somebody's woken up to this like crazy problem. That side of the business, Eddie is been
Because the model, just so that we understand it, the model is that in terms of, if you like, how, because one of my things I always say to people who are excited about it, like a new idea, I say, okay, what's the problem you're going to solve and how are you going to make money out of it, right? Sometimes people forget that second part. And in the enthusiasm for the problem solving. And if I'm right, your proposition is essentially to the care companies, right? And so you're providing them with a differentiating benefit in these particular care homes that our people we care for also get this service. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's multiple stakeholders. So the person who owns and operates the care home, they have a huge vested interest and it's largely around reducing complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And the hard thing for them is attracting and retaining good staff.
Right.
And it's a extraordinarily difficult places to work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's extraordinarily complicated. Now, if you can remove a lot of that work, say, hey, I'm going to take on the care coordination of that patient, so you don't have to worry. Well, now you've just made their lives so much easier. When the families of these people, they're calling because they want to know about the new medications their dad is on or whatever, they're going to call us and not call the facility. Well, now you've removed phone calls. But when going back to your question about payment, what's changed is the government seeing these pockets of the population that are underserved. They've actually shifted reimbursements to reward new models of care. So like new financial products. And so we're actually now able to get rewarded for keeping these people out of the hospital.
Right.
Well, and these people are in the hospital so much, and keeping them out of the hospital isn't that difficult. You just have to turn up and there's a
Look after
thing
them.
for managing the meds, managing the wounds, managing psychiatric issues. So you can save the government a lot of money. You can save the patient a lot of pain from having to go into the hospital, and you can save the family a lot of the cost of, the hospital copays and co-insurance and stuff. And we can now get rewarded by the government for saving everybody money. And so if you do well, then that becomes a really nice economic sort of growth platform.
It's brilliant. So it sounds like you're delivering against your own personal mission statement that you created up that mountain, but also for ascend, it's rather appropriate. It's called ascend, isn't it? I hadn't thought of that before.
It's elevating body, mind, and soul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, Eddie, it's been a frustrating journey where, for 10 years, I'm trying at this mission, and I just like half the time you're kind of feeling you're failing because the system's set up to fail you,
right.
right? But fundamentally, the healthcare system is not the way it should be, and the forces running against you are fierce.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's kind of the why we go to work, right? And you've got that really clear, but you struggled for a number of years because you couldn't deliver on your why, but you found a way to do it. It sounds to me. which is fantastic. So I'd quite like to just pivot the conversation a little bit. What you've been saying is fascinating, frankly, about the way everything works. But also, you are essentially running a startup, and you work for extremely big, one of the world's biggest health organizations, United, where I know that your role was very much a transformation role. A lot of the work you've been doing over the last few years is kind of in analytics and analysis and transformation. How can we do things differently? And so I guess I'd love to know kind of some of your own personal takeaways or experiences or stories from trying to drive change in this very harsh environment, which doesn't really want to change because it makes a ton of money. Um, and I don't know, just be really interested if you have anything particular to share on that front.
Um, yeah. So I mean, fundamentally, my role was in driving change. And one thing I learned about, first of all, I learned about innovation. Innovation is a process, and you can map out that process, and you can practice, and you can get good at that.
Hmm.
Um, and so I've kind of built my innovation playbook.
Hmm.
And I really try and you kind of start with the why, really try it, and collaboratively align on a future state
Hmm.
so that your destination, and only then do you start going into mapping out like, well, what is that journey?
Right.
Once again, doing it as collaboratively as possible. Um, and then you move into kind of your agile sort of development rollout plan. It's amazing, probably the most important step is just defining the problem up front and getting alignment on the problem.
It's so funny, Tom, because you just described almost perfectly my own coaching model, which I think I've talked to you about it on occasions. That first step is to talk about where we are now, get alignment on that before we even begin to talk about the future, because it's almost like everybody's itching to talk about how it's all going to be, but actually sometimes they can't even really properly describe how it is now. And if there's more than one person, they very often can't agree on it.
And I mean, you know how just about worse as I did. My wife was like constantly like looking for things. It's like there's not a problem. What like why are you fixing something that isn't broken? It's a perfectly good chair. You do not need a new chair.
I would say, well, let's leave your wife out of this. But no, I think that's right. But in a way, that is a misalignment on the A state, right? Which is the sort of the current state. And but I can completely imagine that one of the challenges in that health environment is that yes, there's a need for change, and you've been talking about, for example, the need to have that more holistic approach to people's medicine. But then there'll be other people who are just completely driven by the money and their careers or whatever it is, and they'll see that as a big threat to them, presumably even some of the doctors, I would imagine.
Yeah, the hardest thing in healthcare is this, in terms of driving transformation, is the number of stakeholders in every problem.
Mm.
It's way greater than you ever think.
Hmm.
And unless you really plan for that, you'll find some stakeholder who is misaligned with you has the ability to have a put option and just shut your project down.
Hmm.
And so part of that problem definition, you kind of really try and think through all the different stakeholders and then actually involve each of those stakeholders in that problem definition. Like you
Yeah.
define what is the problem for you, and um, and really you got to kind of understand what are their incentives
Hmm.
and their alignment, because fundamentally, yeah, the way I mean, Baylor Scott, right? There used to be this joke where a 99-1 vote was a tie. In a highly conservative organization, and healthcare has to be kind of conservative because you don't want,
Yeah.
people like taking huge risks with your health, right? But it's almost designed so that, everybody says no. And so that's why it moves so slowly. And so, what you often find is these shared services departments, technology, legal, revenue cycle, that they actually yield enormous amounts of power, even though they don't actually touch the patient.
Yeah. Yeah. And the power of veto to say we're not changing this. This part works really well, makes us a ton of money, whatever it is. Yeah.
And doctors, by nature, are typically very conservative.
Yeah.
And then they have their clinical councils. And so now you're having to turn up, and there'll be 40 doctors sitting around a table debating some kind of new technology thing that none of them understand. And it only takes one of them to say, well, I don't like it.
Interesting.
And often it's, I don't like it because it's not my idea. It's like, so it's really hard to drive change his health system, but very good communication.
But you're now in a more nimble, small organization, albeit growing quite quickly, I think. And so in terms of your own leadership, if you like, of coming into this much smaller environment, with a very strong vision, do something very specific, no longer kind of in that big organization with all that great weight of the parts and existing kind of revenue streams on your head, everything to prove. What's been the biggest challenge for you personally in terms of your leadership and setting up this business? What's been the thing that you found most tricky?
I have to say the last 2 years, I think, have been the most challenging of my career.
Mm-hmm.
And some things coming in have worked really well, and then other things have really forced me to kind of reevaluate. The I guess the biggest challenge that I've found is really around the number and speed with which folks are just able to digest change.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter how well it's communicated, how well it's planned, or if there's just too much, it all falls apart. So it kind of almost forces you to say, okay, well, I now need to, instead of parallel pathing things, I've got to put them on a single line, and it's like prioritize, and we're only going to change one thing, and it's like this, right?
Okay.
Now that does, you can potentially like, hey, this department can have their change program, this department can have, but so many of these programs cross a lot of different departments. And, and I'm kind of catering to, on one side, we've got shareholders who want to move fast, right? Hey, and then you've got the reality of just your rank and file who are just saying, gosh, I can't take it anymore. And there's a real friction. And I think the other thing that's really challenged me is to really think about just the people side of things, where
Mm-hmm.
different stages of the organization, I hate to say it, just require different people. And some people are just like not going to work out.
Right.
And you've got to, it's just not in my nature to be ruthless. So you kind of want to like, oh, let's give them an extra month. Maybe they can check, like really understanding that how that human's brains work,
Right.
and then understand what you're asking for them, that there can be a fundamental mismatch.
Right.
If it's a fundamental mismatch, you just got to do the hard thing and like cut bait and bring in the person who you need. And it might be that you only need them for 2 years and then you're going to need something else.
Right.
And it means that the HR side of things requires that's probably the area that requires by far and away the most amount of work and thinking and thought and strategy.
That's certainly in line with what I've found in my coaching work, that 90% of what I do is talking to senior executives about people issues of some sort or other, the kind of thing you've described. And of course, if you work in a very big organization, then there are ways in which you can find another job for somebody, or you can just put up with them for 3 months not doing a very good job because the organization is big enough to handle it. But in reality, in your kind of situation, every single person you have, you need them to be firing all cylinders and delivering exactly what's needed. It seemed to me, anyway. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and I might say as well, there's that what are you solving for? You can also look at it, what are you solving against? And increasingly what find a drama. And you find that drama often centers around a small number of people.
Mm-hmm.
But that drama has such long tentacles, and it ends up consuming so much time and energy and bandwidth that it just takes you away from the everyday.
Yeah.
So on one side you can say, how do I organize for those like great soldiers who just go do exactly what you want them, right? But you can also just like, how do I remove drama? Because if I can remove drama, then naturally we can just move faster.
Right. Interesting. And when you say drama, what sort of thing are we talking about? People not getting on well together, or finding it difficult to communicate?
Yeah, well, I find it's whenever I'm getting a call that pulls me away from my work. It's like, there's it's certain people's feelings. Sometimes it's drama at home.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's drama within teams.
Yeah.
But it's typically people resisting, like, or yeah, I mean, or worse, just like not turning up for work. Just I kind of use that as a very large bucket of stuff.
But certainly, I think that
Management headaches. So
every single thing in the world just about has this bell chart, and within the change or the transformation environment, but your advocates on one end, your detractors at the other end, and the people in the middle who are watching with interest to see what's going to happen. And those detractors, if they become long-term detractors of what's being proposed, they're a massive problem. And very often, one just has to do something brutal with them. But I think in a way what you just described there in terms of these potential dramas, essentially what you're talking about is a group of humans working together. I don't think it's any different in any environment. But of course, if you're working in the environment of a startup with a limited number of people and a very tight budget and a tremendous amount of ambition, the tolerance for that kind of thing becomes less, right? Just haven't got time for it.
well, I just say that the impact can be just magnified.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, your tolerance can't be as much, or it's just such a distraction.
Yeah, it's the opportunity cost, right? You spend 2 hours sorting out some disagreement between two people when you could have been doing something really useful. So what do you think would be your ambition for the company and this business that you've created in, say, 10 years from now? What would you hope would be the situation in, let's say, 10 years?
I think I the underlying hope is scale, because scale says that customers really getting value for the service you're delivering. and you're being able to do it in a way that rewards e- economic scalability. So, yeah, I would just feel there is a better way for treating certain populations. And I don't think we've necessarily said we cracked the nut, but I would say at least we're trying. At least we're playing the game. And every week we're getting a little bit better at it. And that's really encouraging. And so I just see this trajectory that we're on, saying, well, where are we going to be in 5 years? Just the quality of the healthcare experience that we're going to be delivering is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And that, the scale, you know, you scale organically, you scale through acquisition, stuff that's where things get messy, right? Because now you're suddenly saying, okay, well, we've got a really good way of delivering care, but we're going to buy a company that delivers care in a different way and see if we can reimagine that company.
Right.
Yeah, that can get messy. So
It would almost sounds to me as though you need to grow organically, because once again, if you take over any company which has been working in a more traditional way and you want them to work in this completely new way, you've got another massive change, transformation challenge on your hands. So that if you could grow it organically, it might even be the fastest route to success.
yeah, I think that's what sometimes you need a beachhead in certain markets just to get you in, but fundamentally organic growth is your primary weapon. Um, I think, I mean, we've gone through 3 different acquisitions just in the last 6 months, just to kind of add certain capabilities that we needed, and each time, it's just, like, so hard. And you kinda say, "Oh god, I don't wanna go through that again." It it it's such a distraction to the team. Whereas, yeah, if you can just have your kind of wash, rinse, and repeat, here's the formula, you can scale way faster,
Yeah. Well,
probably less risk too.
but coming back to your own holistic principle, I do get the feeling that despite all the challenges, despite all the headaches, that you are happy, right? This is you get up in the morning excited to take on another day of this work.
Well, I certainly feel purpose,
Yeah.
and when you see happiness, it's interesting. One of my mentors wrote a little post on Instagram, which I thought was great. He said, me and my sons, we got together as like we're all entrepreneurs and like what makes us happy. Um, and he said that the first one was the autonomy to do things like the way you felt they should be done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that also comes back with purpose, right? Purpose and your autonomy. Um, Secondly, they said the leverage and the people to basically enable you to do that. And then thirdly, the capital, right? So the resources. I think part of the challenge in startups is just the paucity of people,
Right.
and that you end up wearing so many hats and having so much like responsibility on you that it becomes a drain, right? Just on your energy. And so yeah, it's funny. We're at that period where I find real satisfaction and purpose. I also find just like the amount I'm having to do is somewhat draining. Now, as you hit some milestones, now you can start bring in a bench,
Yep.
and you can focus more on accountability and less on responsibility. And I think getting that right balance will definitely help with just overall happiness level.
Yeah, absolutely. And slightly controversially, I have never really signed up to this kind of idea that our work is all about happiness. I mean, I think we should have satisfaction and we should feel motivated, and that we should kind of get up in the morning feeling, okay, I've got a series of things I need to do today to move forward with this. But personally, I've never, ever had a situation where I'd rather go to the office than go to the beach with my family. I think that there are some people, and maybe they're very lucky, who they're able to intersect kind of happiness with their work. Personally, I think that being motivated and excited by the work we're doing is in itself a kind of professional happiness. But to your point, it very often is hard work, right? Exhausting. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, frankly.
Yeah, I wrote some interesting stuff about that and different opinions. Yeah, people can find sources of happiness from all kinds of places, from their family, their friends. They can find purpose outside of their work. And hey, sometimes work is a paycheck. You just gotta suck it up and do it. But then, yeah, make sure you're finding purpose somewhere else in your life. If you're not finding
I actually think finding purpose in another place in life is extremely important, because sometimes work spits you out when you least expect it. And it can be extremely disturbing if you've placed all of your kind of life eggs into the work basket, and suddenly you find yourself without a job or whatever it is, and you're like, what just happened? But if you have a lot of purpose in other parts of your life, then you're far better defended against that situation.
Well, and Eddie, huge amount of research going into longevity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And these Harvard Business School people have decades of now like research into happiness, and now you're able to kind of look at the crux of those two things. So they're saying, hey, we have all these 80-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at the surveys they took 30 years ago,
Right.
and let's see what we can learn. And first of all, are they alive or dead?
Yes.
Well, are they happy or not?
Mm-hmm.
And what's fascinating, the number one, and it's really correlation, right? But number one predictor of longevity at 50, of how long you're going to live, was actually the quality of your relationships.
Right. Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with your health, your physical health, right? Isn't that amazing? So that goes back to, here we are, we're complicated beings. And if your doctor is only taking care of all these physical things and you're missing the slice of the pie where someone is just like, has the worst relationships, healthy, but it's like, to what end?
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's very interesting indeed. And I've read also that, being part of a community and feeling that you belong are very important. And you can be extremely healthy but not happy. So I think actually that is a great way to round up our conversation, which has led us down a few interesting paths, and I've personally found extremely interesting and enjoyable. We've been chatting for 51 minutes, so we don't want to take up too much time of your lunch, my lunch, and everybody else's lunch listening to this. So, Tom, thank you so much indeed for sharing that with us. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
I'll see you very soon.
Okay. Bye, Otep.